Conditions haven't been ideal for growing Paulownia here in Ireland during the past year. A long period of unusually wet, well above average rainfall, followed by a cool start to the summer. Nonetheless, there's some really good growth now in most of the Paulownia. Vegetation control is vital, and during the past few days I've been strimming, bush cutting, taking back the vegetation as best I can. The hope was that I wouldn't have to do too much vegetation control in this area, that the Paulownia would shade out the grass and other vegetation, and therefore I wouldn't have to do any bush cutting. Some of the Paulownia are now well established, though quite a few are struggling. A customer who first got in touch with me regarding Paulownia around 2.5 years ago dropped by the other day to buy a few Paulownia. They're based in the north of the country, Edgeworth town, here in Ireland. The objective for them is to grow Paulownia commercially for the high value constructional timber. And during their first inquiry, they were interested in growth rates, yields, etc. And I said, well, I can't give you that information because I don't know. These were only around a year old then. And they got in touch with one of the large commercial providers of cloned Paulownia. And likewise, they couldn't give him any information because there isn't any information about Paulownia here in Ireland. What I'd say in terms of my small experimental patch here is it's possibly not representative of how successful, how well Paulownia are going to grow here in Ireland. This is a north-facing slope, very shaded, especially during the winter. Paulownia are a sun-loving tree, and although they're deciduous, so they don't have any leaves during the winter, so perhaps shading during the winter isn't a significant issue. However, Paulownia don't like their roots soaking in water, and as I say, it's been very wet during the past year. And also, and this is just an intuitive observation, this site's exposed to cold northerly winds, and the cold in Eastern Europe isn't an issue because it's a dry cold, whereas here in Ireland it's a wet, damp, soggy cold. Ideal conditions for slugs, and I'd say the reason why some of the Paulownia are struggling is because the slugs nibbled off the early growth. Paulownia are called the miracle tree, and for good reason. So this one is putting out new growth, new basal shoots, though up until the last week or so it has still been damp here in Ireland, and even the fresh basal growth has been grazed on by the slugs. This is interesting, I haven't seen one of these before. Paulownia are highly palatable, so it's not just going to be the slugs that dine out on them, everything else will as well. This one is sprouting a very vigorous shoot from the base here, which is encouraging, and all but one of the Paulownia that I have is putting out fresh new growth. This one so far has failed to produce any new growth, so it might be one that I replace. Successful commercial Paulownia plantations in Eastern and Southern Europe are managed. A lot of effort goes into setting them up in the first place and maintaining them thereafter. Often irrigation systems are put in. It's been very wet here, as I say, for the last 10 months, though now with a cold, dry, northerly wind, everything's drying up really quickly. Another aspect is people go around and they trim off the side shoots so that you get one straight telegraph pole to harvest for the valuable commercial timber. I'm keen on growing natural varieties, and these were elongata that I planted last year, and they were quite small when they went into the ground, and I'll show you shortly what my strategy is now, though one or two of them have really taken. I do work at my wee plantation here. It's not just a stick them in the ground, walk away and let them get on with it. And with Paulownia that's especially the case. Paulownia need a lot of nurturing, so if you're considering growing Paulownia, then be aware that you're going to have to put in a reasonable amount of effort until they become large enough to fend for themselves. So my strategy now is to grow Paulownia on until they're a bit larger before planting them out in my patch over there. Another issue that I hear concerning Paulownia is invasiveness. They're not going to be invasive here in Ireland. I'd be astonished if you got them to self-seed. They require high temperatures and high humidity in order to get them to germinate, though that temperature needs to be consistently above around 18-20 degrees, I'd say, from experience. So I sowed all of these on the 2nd of May this year, and generally Paulownia will start to germinate in around 2 weeks. It's now the 2nd of June, and none of these 5 different varieties, none of them have germinated yet or are even showing signs of germination. These are tomentosa, supposedly the most invasive species, and the seed came from Stefan in Germany, and it's very fresh. It will be very viable, and even this hasn't germinated. And the reason for that is, although the temperature in this polytunnel is around 26 degrees C at the moment, it can dip down below 12, and I'd say the range for germinating Paulownia seed is between 18 minimum and perhaps 35 maximum. These are Fortunii, a natural variety which I germinated on the heated base, and made a mistake on labelling them. It's still June 24. Plugged these up in May 24. So they're doing really nicely, and I'm looking forward to planting these out. I'm very hopeful that I'll get some decent growth out of the best of my Paulownia here this year. If you're intending growing Paulownia commercially, then my strong recommendation is that you buy a few different varieties, perhaps some clones, but certainly a lot of seed grown varieties, and start experimenting. Thanks a mil for watching. Good luck.